You're listening to TBR Radio Presents, the Dixie Heritage Hour, with your host, the Director of Dixie Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of TBR Radio Presents, the Dixie Heritage Hour. Every week it's my joy, it's my privilege, it's my honor to be able to bring this radio program to you. And I'm just humbled by the fact that so many of you take the time every week either to listen to it on TBR Radio or to download it off the internet and to listen to it at some other time. I just want to say thank you. When we started Dixie Heritage back in 2015, we were just trying to inform some people about what was going on, rally the troops a little bit, kind of get ahead of what I could see was going to be a cultural cleansing. And we were just trying to get ahead of that. We were just trying to get ahead of attacks that I knew were going to come against some of our monuments and against the Confederate battle flag. And so when we started the Dixie Heritage newsletter, I think it had been out for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and I get an email from Congressman Ben Jones. And I thought, how cool is this? Congressman Ben Jones had subscribed to my newsletter, and we began talking, and we became friends, and it was just exciting. For those of you who the name Congressman Ben Jones doesn't set off any bells of memory, he was better known as Cooter in the Dukes of Hazzard. Before that, he had appeared in a movie called Moonrunners. He also had appeared in the movie, and I know you all know this movie, Smokey and the Bandit with Burt Reynolds and Jerry Reed. He was in that movie as well. But most people remember him best for his role as Cooter Jones on the Dukes of Hazzard. Of course, Cooter being the tow truck driver, the mechanic, the guy who would always get on the CB, breaker, breaker, this is crazy, Cooter, coming at you. And so I thought, how cool is this? Because when I was a kid, I was a big Dukes of Hazzard fan, of course. Those of you who've been listening to the TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour for the last few weeks, you know I'm a big Dukes of Hazzard fan. And so how cool is this? Cooter is emailing me. And so I've got to become friends with Cooter over the last 2.5 years. And when we decided that we were going to do the podcast, which have evolved very quickly into the TBR radio program that you're listening to now, one of the first people that I reached out to was Ben Jones, and I said, Congressman Jones, would you be willing to set for an interview on my upcoming podcast? And he said, I'd absolutely love to do so. And so he was actually the first person who agreed to be a guest on the show. For whatever reason, we had some scheduling conflicts and some other issues that prevented us from having done this interview earlier on, so I actually did other interviews before this one. That's why this is not the first broadcast. But still, we've got him this week, Congressman Ben Jones, a.k.a. Crazy Cooter from the Dukes of Hazzard. And he's just a tremendous guy. He's done a lot in the course of his life. Of course, he was an actor. When he wasn't acting, he was working on the railroad. Even before that, when he was a university student in North Carolina, he was involved in the civil rights movement. He was an activist in the civil rights movement. Then he became an actor. Then he became a famous actor. He became an iconic actor when he took the role of Cooter on the Dukes of Hazzard. And then after the Dukes of Hazzard left television, he was approached by some people, and he entered into a political career. And he ended up serving 2 terms in the United States Congress. And then all of the proverbial you-know-what hit the fan in regard to the cultural cleansing that we're going through right now, with the attempt by some on the left to completely eradicate every last vestige of the Confederacy and Southern heritage. As he's going to tell us here in this interview, it just fired him up. Congressman Jones almost became a one-man army in the fight for Southern heritage, in the fight to preserve our monuments, in the fight to tell the truth about the Confederate battle flag, in the fight to advance the good name of the Confederate soldier, because Ben Jones has several ancestors who were Confederate soldiers, and he was just utterly offended at the fact that these attacks against Southern heritage were in reality attacks against the integrity and the character and the honor of his ancestors. And so he ended up going to work for the Sons of Confederate Veterans as a heritage defense officer. And he's just been a tireless advocate for Southern heritage. And I appreciate everything that he does on that behalf. And so we're going to talk about all kinds of things. In fact, there's so much stuff that we're going to talk about. I don't know that we're going to be able to fit it into one show. We're probably going to end up having Congressman Jones on 2 shows. But let's just go ahead and get right into the telephone interview with Congressman Ben Jones. Ben.
Yes.
This is Edward DeVries with Dixie Heritage.
Hey, Ed. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good.
How are you, brother? Down in Florida. How things in sunny Florida today?
Well, I haven't walked outside yet, but I thought it was a little chillier than it should be, but it is nice and sunny out the window.
Where are you located exactly?
In Ocala.
Oh, yeah. Great town. I worked on the railroad in Ocala in, it would have been 1962, I guess. And it was cattle country.
Yep.
Beautiful down there. It isn't anymore. I mean, the last time I went through there, it was a big town on the interstate. But when I first worked there weren't any interstates.
When I was a kid, I grew up in Chicago, but my grandfather had a horse farm in Ocala.
Right. I mean, it was really horsey everywhere.
Yeah, and now it's, like you said, like, for example, our shopping mall is called the Paddock Mall because I can remember when it used to be horse paddocks.
First time I ever saw a color television was down there and working on the railroad then. I went to this place, in a bar, restaurant kind of thing one night, and there was a color TV. It was awful color back in those days, but, you know, I thought I'd gone into the future.
So as we start the interview, there are just so many things that I could call you. I could call you Congressman Ben Jones. I could call you Mr. Ben Jones. I could call you Ben. I could call you Cooter. Over the years, you've just worn so many hats. You've had so many titles. You've accomplished so much. What do you like to be called?
I don't care. Just don't call me late for supper. Ben is fine, but it is certainly true that Cooter has become a permanent nickname. It doesn't matter what else I do in my life. That Cooter is what people are going to remember, and I appreciate that.
So exactly how did you become Cooter? Didn't it actually start before the Dukes of Hazzard with a movie called Moonrunners?
Well, I was in that Moonrunners movie. I knew a fellow named Guy Waldron. I worked in Atlanta in show business and theater and films and doing commercials and things. And along the way, I'd run across him. He was a TV director at WSB Television, big station there in Atlanta. And that was in the days when they did live shows. They had kiddie shows and things. And he directed a show there. And I got to know him, and he was interested. He was a writer, besides being a TV director. He wrote a thing based on the exploits of a fellow up in North Carolina named Jerry Rushing, whom I also knew. Jerry was an old moon runner and stock car driver, and he had a lot of stories. And so the Moon Runners was based on Jerry Rushing's stories about, because they were always being chased by the law, by the boss of the county there, and I hung out at a place called the Boar's Nest, and Jerry was a boar hunter, too. But anyhow, he told those stories, and Guy Waldron, a fellow named Bob Clark, turned those into a movie called The Moonrunners. It was a low-budget thing, but had a couple of things going for it. Waylon Jennings did the music and the narration, and he was to do that later on the Dukes of Hazzard. Waylon was a great talent, and so he brought something to it, a little name. And there had been a movie back in the late 50s, you might remember, called Thunder Roads. It was the first of the Moonshine movies, and Robert Mitchum was in it. And Robert Mitchum, in fact, wrote it and directed it and produced it, and one of those deals. And his son, Jim Mitchum, was in it. In Thunder Road, Jim Mitchum played Robert Mitchum's brother. So Guy got a hold of Jim Mitchum to play one of the guys, and Moonrunners was, what the Dukes of Hazzard evolved into. It was okay, low-budget independent film, and I had a small part in it. I played a revenuer in that one. But several years went by. Guy went out to Hollywood and was doing some work out there and took that Moonrunners idea and turned it into a TV series. Now, remember, this is in the late 70s, and what had happened is that Smokey and the Bandit had come out. I had a tiny part in that, but it was huge. It was at that time the biggest movie ever for box office. It was just enormous. And so you know how Hollywood is. Say, hey, we got to do more of this. You know, why is this so popular? They didn't understand it, but they knew about the cash register ringing. So Smokey and the Bandit had happened, and at that time, Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson were the outlaws. You know, they were big, and then also NASCAR had become, you know, a huge TV sport in the late 70s with those drivers like Earnhardt and Bill Elliott and Cale Yarborough. Suddenly, you know, it was Sunday afternoon television. It was huge. So all of those things combined. Also, there was a lot of attention to the South, positive attention, not what we're getting these days, because Jimmy Carter from Plains, Georgia, peanut farmer, had been elected president. So they come south in the fall of 1978, 40 years ago, Ed, to film the first 5 episodes of this new TV series called The Dukes of Hazzard. Now, I just went down there to audition. I knew what the deal was, and I was perfect for what they were looking for, and I just went in. I believe I was the first regular member of the cast who was cast. It was in Atlanta. And it was a great break for me, obviously. I'd worked at being an actor and worked in, you know, in film and television and stage. I did a lot of stage work for about 15 years at that point. But here, you know, it's just a perfect storm. Everything happened, fell in place, and here I was. Of course, nobody thought the show was going to do anything. We did those first 5 episodes in Georgia, and that's when the cast first got together. I'll never forget it as long as I live. At around the swimming pool at the Holiday Inn in Conyers, Georgia. Here sits, you know, the first read-through of the script, and there's Denver Powell, who was, you know, a wonderful actor. He'd done all those great things. And, you know, Andy Griffith, he was Mr. Darlin. He was in Bonnie and Clyde. He played the Texas Ranger that caught him, and done Mad Jack on Grizzly Adams, but he also just done hundreds and hundreds of great Western TV films and you know, feature films. So Denver was, you know, just, and a wonderful guy too. And there's Jimmy Best, the same kind of story. James Best could do anything as an actor. He was a very gifted and talented guy. He was a writer, a director, and one of the most respected acting teachers in Hollywood. There's Jimmy Best, and you know, he was also on the Andy Griffith Show, and I've seen him. He got shot off a lot of stagecoaches out there doing westerns over the years. And there's Sorrel Book. Now, Sorrel, who played Boss Hogg, was a Broadway actor and a very different kind of fellow. He was an intellectual. He was absolutely brilliant, spoke 7 or 8 languages, was a Shakespearean actor and an opera singer, but he got it, and it was perfect as Boss Hogg. Then you had the kids, and John Schneider I knew from Atlanta. I think I met him. He was about 15, 16 years old, had little parts in films, and I'd see him at auditions. And then Tom Wopat had already done some off-Broadway musicals and things, and they had great chemistry between them. And then came Catherine Bach walking in, and I was thinking, we got something here. I mean, that's a force of nature. Catherine was. I mean, it's just. And so these things depend on, success depends on chemistry when you're doing any kind of project. But in show business, that chemistry, what creates a whole, you know. And
I have no doubt that on a lot of shows they try to create the chemistry, to manufacture the chemistry. But it sounds like it just came together naturally with the Dukes of Hazzard. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I mean, the whole thing came together. The elements of our show. If you let me be long-winded here for a little bit, what worked about the Dukes of Hazzard was the same thing that worked on those Saturday morning and afternoon westerns that played at the movie theaters when I was a kid, what they call the B-westerns, the Saturday matinees. It was Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy and the Durango Kid and all those guys, and they were heroes. They were heroes to us kids. They were role models, really. Showed us how to behave, do the right thing. And in those films, nobody ever really got hurt. You know, you could go off a cliff and have a stagecoach land on top of you and just get up and brush yourself off, you know, and nobody bled, nobody cussed. There's always a pretty rancher's daughter, but, you know, it was nothing overtly that you wouldn't want the kids to see. And in those shows, Roy and Gene and those guys always won because they did the right thing. They made the right moral choice. The same thing that we had learned at Sunday school. Yeah, these guys are good guys, and they'll sacrifice themselves to do the right thing. And in the end, the crooked banker gets his comeuppance, and Roy or Gene, whoever, saved the ranch for the rancher's daughter. And there was a lot of great music in those. They were both good singers. They'd be riding out in the desert and start singing, and be a full symphony orchestra somewhere behind them. So, and slapstick comedy, which never gets old. They always had a sidekick, a Smiley Burnett or Pat Buttram or somebody. So we had all those elements, and we had that great action. We had the best stuntmen in the world. And so the car's flying through the air. Nobody's really getting hurt. There's great slapstick comedy, which isn't topical. It lasts forever. And you had the best-looking rancher's daughter in the world, Daisy Duke, and you had these good old boys doing the right thing and risking their necks, and had, slapstick. The whole thing was there. Boss and Roscoe doing slapstick, walking in the doors and slipping on banana peel, and great music underneath it with Waylon Jennings and all those other stars from Nashville. For me, that show, and it still goes on. It still has a life that's very, very popular all over the world. We'll get to that. But the United States of America and I believe North Korea are the only countries in the world where you can't turn on the television and see the Dukes of Hazzard. That's an awful state we've come to, but we're there. Anyhow, it was a great ride, that one was. And so I just played myself, basically, and did a little more comedy. And over the years that my character, I sort of matured him, and he went from being the crazy guy to the sort of the pillar of the community.
You talk about Cooter as a pillar of the community. The last episode of the Dukes of Hazzard that I watched, which, by the way, just happened to be a couple of days ago, I was watching an episode on DVD with my son. I remember one of the lines from that particular episode is Sheriff Roscoe, and he's got Cooter pulled over on the side of the road, and he looks at Cooter, he says, "I'd handcuff you and throw you in the hoosegow right now if you weren't so necessary to this community."
I figured it was a Cooter, seeing as how he had the only garage and the only tow truck and was the only mechanic in a place where all they did was tear up cars. So he looked like he was the only one that worked. So in that sense, he was the trusted sidekick, but he also was, kept everything rolling. So it was a fun and wonderful experience, and it goes on still. My wife Elma and I do Cooter's places, and they're museums and shops dedicated to the Dukes of Hazzard and to good old boys and to rural America. And so it's, I didn't have to grow up.
Okay. So what was your inspiration to build and develop Cooter's place?
Well, I had after I finished doing the Dukes of Hazzard, somehow or another, I ended up in politics. A guy asked me if I ever thought about running for Congress. This was in 1986. The show ended in 85, and I was at that time the chairman of the state film board, the film office for Georgia, where a lot of filming was coming in. And did some other. I was president of the Screen Actors Guild for Georgia. So I was active that way. And the guy says, you ever thought about running for Congress? And I said, friend, I've got more bones in my closet than the Smithsonian Institute. I'm the last guy in the world that ever run for Congress. He said, yeah, but, you tell it like it is. And so I prayed on it. And it really seemed like the right thing to do. I don't know why. Everybody thought it was a bit of a joke, but I ran, this is in 1986, against an established incumbent who had won pretty much of a landslide in his last election. And I almost beat him. And it's, something had changed. And so I got up next morning after that election, stayed after it, and just said, well, we'll do this again in 2 years. And he got in trouble. It was bad trouble. He was indicted in a sting operation by the FBI, in which he appeared to be, it's a long story, but anyhow, I won in a landslide 2 years later, and there I was going from, I don't know if you know my full story, but I was a low-bottom alcoholic and hit bottom in 1977, and was nearly dying from it. I was just incredibly self-destructive. That stuff runs in our family. And I prayed for help, and it came. And I've been sober since 1977. 1 year later, the Dukes of Hazzard came along. And 10 years or so later, I was elected to Congress. And the only thing I did different in my life was I quit drinking and turned my life over to God, my higher power. Try to let him, it's a lot easier if you let him do it. So there was it made quite a story. There I was from the bottom to, the United States Congress, which was an interesting thing. After 2 terms of that, I got redistricted. Went back to doing films and things, and then I moved out here to the Blue Ridge Mountains in the late 90s, and saw this, we just found this wonderful home. And I wasn't thinking about doing this until I saw this roadside stand. This was kind of a fruit market, vegetable marketplace along the road. They sell apple cider and stuff and apples, and it was for rent. And I got to think, that place, why don't I put an old General Lee out in front of that and get a bunch of apple cider, Uncle Jesse's apple cider, and Cooter's peanut butter or something, and sell pictures and from the show and put my old costumes up there and the scripts and everything. Everybody thought I was crazy, and I am a little bit, but that thing took off. It took off, and suddenly there were people coming from all over the world to this little town here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And then we opened one in Gatlinburg, and it took off. And a few years after that, we opened one in Nashville, Tennessee, right across from the Grand Ole Opry. So we've got 3 of these venues now. And we just had a ball with it. The whole cast comes sometimes, and we do festivals, and we have regular visits from members of the cast. And, we got the cars, and it's just a great fun. And I don't understand the appeal of the show. I do, really. As I described, it's just something everybody can relate to, and it's television that the whole family can watch together. But if somebody had told me when we started filming that 40 years later, people all over the world would be watching this and loving it still, and that the kids who were watching it back in 1979, that their grandchildren would be watching it, I wouldn't have been able to comprehend that. But it's true. It's just a beloved thing. And, of course, I'd always made my career in the South. I'd worked in New York and Los Angeles, but I loved the South. And in Atlanta, I'd found a way to, see the South grow and become the fastest growing economy in the country and maybe in the world. And that I'd been a part of that. And I was very, very proud of that because what the South had come through.
Well, Ben, we're going to have to pause here for just a second because we've gone a very long time without breaking for any type of a commercial. So here for just a few seconds, we're going to have a brief word from our sponsor, the Barnes Review magazine. And after that, about 60 seconds from now, we'll be back with Cooter from the Dukes of Hazzard.
If you love listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, then I know that you'll love reading the Barnes Review. The Barnes Review is one of my favorite magazines. I began reading the Barnes Review long before they became a sponsor here on the program. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There's just not a more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So if you'll visit www.barnesreview.org, that's www.barnesreview.org, you can find out how you too can become a subscriber to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review by mail, or you can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review electronically in PDF editions. Or you can subscribe to receive both. That's what I do. So visit www.barnesreview.org www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
We're back with Congressman Ben Jones, a.k.a. Cooter from the Dukes of Hazzard. We were talking about his role on the Dukes of Hazzard and Cooter and how he sort of evolved on the show from somebody who was a very secondary character to somebody who became one of the anchors of the show and one of the pillars of the community there in Hazzard County. And as we're talking about the Dukes of Hazzard, all of the characters of that show, Cooter, Uncle Jesse, Daisy, Bo and Luke Duke, Boss Hogg, Sheriff Roscoe, whether they were protagonist or antagonist, it doesn't matter. It seems like that entire TV show and everything about it and all of its characters are getting sucked into this modern movement to purge our country of all things Southern. And I know that you've chosen to fight back. And it's one of the things I appreciate about you is the fact that you have fought back so hard on this stuff and pushed back. And you've been a very strong defender of our Southern heritage. Of course, I know there was nothing racist about the Dukes of Hazzard. And I believe our audience, for the most part, knows that as well. You know, basically, it's just a tragedy that the Dukes of Hazzard would get sucked into all of this political nonsense that's going on in America right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, everybody loved the Dukes of Hazzard. Well, in our polling, we saw that black people, especially in the South, loved the Dukes of Hazzard. You know, I went and said, look, you know, the South, where I come from, and I've lived in Atlanta in those days and flew out to L.A. to do my thing, and I'd fly back to Atlanta when we had a little break. And I knew, everybody, it would come up, Cooter! I had a basketball team. I was a sponsor. I was the only white guy on the team. All those guys loved the Dukes of Hazzard. It was not a problem. You know, in fact, they related to it because the Duke boys were up against the machine, you know, up against the boss, the guy who, you know, had all that. So, people related to it. It's like that all over the world. So here, when we first came on the air, the day the show came on the air in January of 1979, the critic for the Los Angeles Times, named Howard Rosenberg, and I think he's still a critic for the Los Angeles Times, he said of the Dukes of Hazzard, this show will not last past the first commercial break. That's 40 years ago. Oh, Howard was wrong. It's all over the world. It's been in 50 countries, half a dozen languages, thousands of items of merchandise out. And all this, see, that was before cable, before satellite dishes, before the internet. So on Friday night, we had 30, 40 million people watching us. And then the kids would watch it during the week in syndication. Now there's, you know, all this cable and internet and DVDs and VHS and Netflix. And so all of a sudden in the middle of this, because one crazy person, one just psychopathic nut in South Carolina, there's a villainous, horrible act, goes into a church and kills people praying. What is worse than that? Because of that one guy, that's the opportunity that the media, the left, all of these people who hate the South, who don't really want to see racial conciliation and respect for each other's heritage, they want conflict. They thrive on that. All of a sudden, they overwhelm us. This is the worst thing that ever happened. Oh, my God, we got to take down this flag. We got to tear down that statue. They all get self-righteous and sanctimonious. Meanwhile, nothing's changed. We're still the same people we were 2 years ago when we were getting along pretty good and making some progress. So this is the worst. This is the antithesis, what is going on now. The exact opposite of what Dr. King wanted. He wanted to build bridges of brotherhood, sit down together and put the past behind us because we shared that past and we have all those things in common. And they sit at that table of brotherhood. This is the opposite of that. This says, you know, you're bad, you're wrong. I'm good, I'm right. And we've got the votes to tear that thing down, to do everything they can. It's the biggest setback since the Civil Rights Movement, where we made all that progress and brought people together. Now we see all of that progress being destroyed by, Antifa or whatever, and the Black Lives Matter, and the usual suspects, Al Sharpton, those people. They don't live down here. They haven't spent a life as I have, in the South, working and working with black people and working with, red people and just down in the trenches trying to make things better for everybody. So that's where we are right now, and it's not a pretty picture, and we've only got one thing to do, and that is to fight these folks and fight them every day, all day long, because God is watching this thing, and that's the reason it has to be spiritual. It involves changes of heart. You can't do this politically. You can't make us feel some other way. You can't erase our family and our ancestors and their courage and sacrifice from American history. You can't do it because it's in our hearts, and we pass it down. And that's what Southern heritage is.
So let's go back to Cooter's Place, and for those of our listeners who do not know what Cooter's Place is or who haven't figured it out yet, Cooter's Place are the 3 stores that you own at various places in the South where you promote Southern heritage, sell Southern and Dukes of Hazzard related merchandise, and each Cooter's has a Dukes of Hazzard and a Southern Heritage Museum within it. But let's get back to the subject of Cooter's Place. Particularly, tell me about Cooter's Last Stand.
Oh, well, it was great. Yeah, I'll be 77 this year. And old Cooter don't jump the fences quite like he used to. And over the years of doing this stuff, we've done huge festivals where we get the whole cast together. We do 2 days of music and 2 days of personal appearances, and it's a car show. Hundreds of General Lee's and Roscoe's sheriff cars and Daisy's Jeep and tow trucks that people have built come. And we have things like wrestling and BMX bicycle stunts. And it's just a grand time. Having food, it's just a celebration. It's a celebration of basically of rural America. And the values of the Dukes of Hazzard, which was do the right thing, stick your neck out if you need to, but, stand up to the bad guys. So all those good things that people loved about it, which made it the kind of family show that's still popular after 40 years. Here's something for you. The Dukes of Hazzard's been taken off the air for one reason. There was a Confederate battle flag, the Christian cross of St. Andrew, on top of the car, the General Lee. So that's got to go off the air while they're showing all this sleaze and slime and porno and all this stuff and forcing it into families' homes. So they take the one positive, totally harmless, upbeat show with great family values, they take it off the air and castigate it. So that's where we are in this culture, and that's what we're fighting against. But Cooter's Last Stand. So I said, I want to do one more. We lost Jimmy Best a couple of years ago. Sorrel Book, who played Boss Hogg, died in 1994. Denver Powell, who played Uncle Jesse, died in 1997. And Jimmy Best, and said, well, we're all getting on up there. Enos and me and everybody, we're getting on. Time doesn't stop. And it keeps rolling along. And who'd have thought that this show would be popular this long for 40 years? So I said, well, I got to do one more big show, and we're going to call it Cooter's Last Stand as a joke. And we had John Schneider and Tom Wopat and Catherine Bach and Rick Hurst, who played Cletus, and Sonny Schroyer, who played Enos, and myself, and Don Pedro Colley, who played Sheriff Little, the sheriff from the next county, who passed away just a few weeks after. It was his last appearance. He was with us. And we had 2 days of great music, bluegrass, rockabilly, little rock and roll, great country music, gospel music. We had a wedding. We just had a ball. And people came from something like, 40 states and 10 or 12 foreign countries. And it was just wonderful. That's what we do. And but that was the last big thing we're going to produce. I'll do, concerts and maybe a little rodeo or something like that, have a demolition derby, you know what I'm saying? So that was the last one, and it's just been, this show has made so many people happy. People say, what's this about this show that stays there? I said, it's fun. It's simple. It's fun. It makes people happy. It makes them feel good. But for a lot of people, it brings back memories of when they were kids and they watched it. And they just like the idea that their kids and their grandkids like it too.
Music has come up several times in our conversation, and it seems that music is a big part of the Dukes of Hazzard and also a big part of Southern culture and Southern heritage. And I understand that you've got a musical group of your own, a band of your own, called Cooter's Garage Band. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh man, they're good. This is one of those little parts of the country where, people always played music. It's out in the mountains. A lot of country music kind of comes from here. A lot of it, bluegrass music, what they call old timey or traditional music. Banjos plunking and fiddles playing, mandolins and things like that. That comes from here. This is where the Carter family came from, and Ralph Stanley, and people like Jim and Jesse McGraw. That music comes from here. It's music that's been played for hundreds of years on, front porches and in parlors and in church and everything. And country music, everybody loves that. This is a rural area. But there are a lot of great players here. And I just happened to run into them. I don't think of myself as a musician at all. And I'm not much of a singer. I'd say I'm not really a singer. I'm an actor. I just get up and act like a singer. And it's worked out great. I ran these really good pickers, and we've been together for 20 years. And it's this band as good as any you'll find anywhere. And we play every week at the store, free parking, free show, free museum. And so if you don't like it, we'll give you your money back. But we played the Grand Ole Opry, and we played, the big venues and places like Renfro Valley, all the traditional places. And we play, I think, and everybody works. They've got jobs, none of us are full-time musicians. I think we've played 25 states now. And we've played all these great state fairs and county fairs that they have up in Northeast. New York and Pennsylvania, places like that. That's country. Everybody thinks of that as being urban, but that's great farm country. Outside of those cities are these great farms and county fairs, and we play all up through there. We played in New England, and they love the Dukes of Hazzard as much as anywhere. That's just fun. Playing music's fun. That's why people do it. It makes them feel better, and I just love it. We record. We've got a recording studio. So, I didn't start doing it till I was almost 60. So, a whole new career.
Well, I've actually listened to several of your tracks, and I will say that Cooter's Garage Band really does sound good. It's a good sounding band. It has a good sound to it. What we're going to do now is we're going to break for another commercial from another one of our sponsors. And as soon as that commercial's over, we're going to resume the broadcast with a clip of Cooter's Garage Band. So don't go anywhere, because as soon as that commercial's over, you're going to hear some really great music performed by some really good guys.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are because you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. You like to hear about the latest financial trends and to know what's happening around the world and right here in the United States, the things that can directly impact you, your life, and the life of your family. And if you're like me, you do not rely on the mainstream media to obtain this information because, frankly, you know that you just can't trust them. Fortunately, there is an alternative news outlet with a long-established track record for honesty and integrity, and that is the American Free Press. AFP is the preeminent alternative, independent news source for honest, hard-working, truth-loving Americans. AFP is the antithesis of the controlled, lamestream media. AFP is employee-owned and has been so since its founding. Because of that, AFP never has and never will allow advertisers or special interests or big money to dictate what appears in the pages of the American Free Press newspaper. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. AFP covers the stories and tells the truth that the lamestream media is frankly scared to touch. And AFP offers real, on-the-scene reporting and commentary, the likes of which you will never see in the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, or just about any other lamestream news source that you can think of. That's right, there's only one national populist news weekly staffed by an unsurpassed team of veteran investigative journalists who will dare to rip the veil off of many of the major news stories that are being censored and suppressed by the big money controlled media monopoly. And that's the American Free Press. AFP publishes exciting, in-depth, uncensored news and information that's grassroots and patriotic, information that Americans need to know in order to combat the growing police state. AFP stands firmly against the New World Order and against those who are working to establish a global plantation under the rule of a powerful few. In short, AFP is your voice. If you have any doubt why they want to silence AFP, you must be relying on the lamestream media for your news, and folks, that's a big mistake. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Lisa Madden. We're going to do a little rock and roll for the ball. Don't bother knocking if the house is a rockin'. Don't bother knocking if the house is a rockin'. Don't bother, come on in. Oh yeah. Take off your shoes, got a losing blues. This whole joint ain't got nothing to lose. It's seen it all for years. Start spreading the news. So get out on that floor and come on, baby, shake some loose. If the house is a rockin', don't bother knocking. Don't bother knocking if the house is a rockin'. Don't bother, come on in. I told you you get rockin'. Don't bother knocking if the house is a rockin'. Don't bother knocking if the house is a rockin'. Don't bother, come on in. Oh yeah, walking up the street you can hear the sound of them bad honky-tonks really laying it down. They seen it all for years. Got that in the news. You get out on that floor. Come on, baby, shake some blues. If the house is a rockin', don't bother knocking. If the house is a rockin', don't bother knocking. If the house is a rockin', don't bother, come on in. Come on in, y'all. Don't bother knocking if the house is a rockin'. Don't bother, come on in. If the house is a rockin', don't bother, come on in.
Dukes of Hazzard had a great musical tradition. A lot of great music came out on that show, and as we said before the break, music is a definite integral part of Southern heritage and Southern culture. And both the tradition of music from the Dukes of Hazzard and the Southern culture, music, tradition, you really have done a great job of extending that with Cooter's Garage Band.
We had great artists on there from, Loretta Lynn, Tammy Wynette, Buck Owens, you name them, Mickey Gilley. I could go on. That was just Freddie Fender, the Oak Ridge Boys. The Dukes had that music, and of course we had Waylon there the whole time being a part of it. So music's sort of an integral part of the Hazzard County.
So what projects are you working on now?
Well, I'm putting together, we did a DVD of the Cooter's Last Stand, of the festivals. And we got that out, and that's for sale. But my next one, it's a big project too, is to do a bigger documentary and more serious, putting all of this film we've had over the years of doing this Cooter's Place thing and with the band and our Dukes Fest and Hazzard Homecomings and the Cooter's Place, put all of that together, all of those car jumps and all of that fun and all of those people in cars into basically a documentary, a musical documentary called Hazzard Nation, because it goes so far beyond just us and the show. We've got fans that just from all over the world who love it and who have collections of Dukes of Hazzard stuff, who build General Lee's and the other cars from the show. They take it seriously and they share it. It's just a fun thing. But Hazzard Nation, we did a show once in Nashville in 2006. And there were 80 to 100,000 people there. It was astonishing. And I got to film all this stuff. We jumped to General Lee. Corey Eubanks, who does all that Fast and Furious stuff, jumped to General Lee over 270 feet in the air. Just landed on the track. That's almost a football field. So we did that live. So we did these Daredevil shows, but it's sort of a record of all of that, of all of the fun we had, and it's a family documentary film about that. And so that's one of them. That's a big one. But my main thing right now, and I'm going down to speak at the Abbeville Institute in Charleston, February 24th, which is, they're Southern historians, and they invited me to speak. I'm not a historian. I love history, but these people are accomplished academics and intellectuals. But I'm going to give the banquet, the main speech, I guess, the night of the banquet, and just talk about where I think we are. And it seems like in some ways, when you're overwhelmed with these headlines every day about this is being torn down, now they're going after this, and all the sanctimony and self-righteous outrage of these folks, it can seem like we're losing, but we're not. Minds have not been changed, and reason and staying calm and cool and having the facts and being who we are and being true to our past, it'll win every time. And this is, they're too hot. That burns out. We're cool. I mean, we know who we are. We know why we're doing what we're doing. It's not just this flavor of the week thing that happens in politics. We're talking about not just the Southern heritage, but American heritage, so much of which came out of the South.
I definitely want to get into a detailed political discussion with you. I want to get your opinions about what's going on in the culture war and the cultural cleansing, what we could do to advance the cause, to educate people and so forth. But that conversation is probably going to require a lot more time than we have. And so what I'd like to do is I would like to bring you back in a couple of weeks, and we'll do an interview, and we will talk about nothing but politics. And I'm looking forward to that conversation, as I'm sure you are as well, and I know our listeners are looking forward to it. For the remaining time that we have, I'd like to stay on the personal. And so how is your health condition? I know that you've been a warrior in the fight for some time now, for many years. I know the battle, I know the fight can take its toll on the body.
I've had a lot of physical problems in the last few years. Back operations and more knee replacements and hip replacements and one thing or another, and had this AFib and double pneumonia. This is all in the last couple of years.
So are you still being treated? Is there any kind of ongoing therapy that you're receiving?
I go over to Winchester, Virginia for pool therapy, water therapy to try to, just deal with my condition. I'm 77, so I got a few more years to fight, I hope. But maybe who knows what's going to happen down the line.
How exactly does somebody find out about Cooter's Place, or how do they order your DVDs that you were talking about, or your book? Is there a website that they can go to?
Yeah, there's a website, cootersplace.com, and we're all over Facebook, too. Cooter's Place Facebook, and I've got a Facebook called Ben Jones, a.k.a. Cooter. So we do a lot of that, but mainly, I'll tell you what, I haven't been able to mention this. My wife, Alma, is the brains of the outfit. She's an extraordinary person. Everybody in Hazard Nation calls her Miss Alma. And Miss Alma was a big Broadway producer and all that stuff, and a famous public relations and that. She's done all that, but she's Miss Alma now, and she is the brains of the outfit. She's a great businesswoman. And so I just get to do sort of, get out and go and sing and sign things and give a picture taken. I get all the credit and she does all the work, which ain't a bad gig for me. So she keeps up with all of that and does all that social media and Facebook, and it's connected up just hundreds of thousands of people all over the world.
Well, that sounds great. How long have you and Miss Alma been married now, Ben?
The past 25 years and going strong, the magic work. It gets better and better, and we're just two peas in a pod, as they say.
That's good to hear, because you're always hearing about celebrities getting divorced. It's good to hear about.
Oh, I did plenty of that back in the day. I mean, my life was, a roller coaster of self-destruction until I was 37 years old. Now, been sober and clean now for 40 years and happily married. You ever heard that expression? You got to give up something to get something. Well, yep. I gave up that life, and what I got was just glorious, happy, contented, serene life of joy. It's just really all I can say. This Dukes of Hazzard thing was a godsend, and it's been fun now for 40 years, and it's made, like I say, there ain't no better business than making people happy. Now, Walt Disney was kind of like that. He was could be a crusty old guy, but he had that vision, let's make people happy. And it paid off pretty good for him, didn't it? Yeah. So I'm, sort of a poor man's Walt Disney. I got my little thing, and it makes people happy, darn it.
There are just so many things that we could talk about.
I'll talk the chicken off the bone, if you know what I mean.
And I'm going to give you the chance to do that here in a couple of weeks. We're going to have you on another broadcast so that we can talk about all of the political stuff that we did not have a chance to get into on this broadcast this week. So until then, on behalf of Southerners everywhere, Congressman Ben Jones, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. See you. Bye.
That was our interview with Congressman Ben Jones. I'll tell you what, if way back yonder when I was an elementary school student, had you told me that 45-year-old me would be hosting a radio show and hanging out with guys like Bo Duke and Cooter Jones from the Dukes of Hazzard, I'd have told you that you were absolutely crazy. But I'll tell you what, I'm living it, and I'm enjoying every second of it. And I really did enjoy our conversation with Ben Jones, with Cooter. And on this broadcast, we were able to get to know Cooter. And I look forward on our next conversation with Ben Jones, getting to know the congressman, the politician, the man who effected some great change for our country as a member of Congress for 2 terms, and who now, even in what he calls retirement, is probably working harder in retirement than he ever did when he was quote-unquote working. Ben Jones has just been a tireless advocate for our Southern heritage, a tireless advocate trying to educate people on the true history of the South and of the war between the states, a true advocate for the development and the advancement of the economy in the Southern states and in the United States as a whole. And so I just appreciate Ben Jones on so many levels, and I look forward to talking with him again here in a couple of weeks. But until then, what I want to do is I want to encourage you to go to the website, www.dixieheritage.net, www.dixieheritage.net. Sign up for the Dixie Heritage newsletter. We'll send it to you free every week. And when you do, I'll also include a free copy of my best-selling book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. I want to give that to you as our gift so that you can stay on the front line of everything that's going on in the battle to preserve our history and our heritage. If you would like to connect with me personally, you can also do that by visiting the website www.dixieheritage.net. When you go to the website, there's a contact page. Use it. Send me an email. Let me know who you are. Let me know where you live. Let me know that you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour on TBR Radio. Also, if you'd like to be a guest on an upcoming episode of TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour, go to the website, shoot me an email, let me know who you are. Well, we've got just a little under 5 minutes left in the broadcast, and so what I'd like to do now is leave you with Cooter's Garage Band singing their own special rendition of the old Creedence Clearwater Revival song, Green River.
We gonna kick back. Oh, Mountain Man's over here. Tim, where are you? There's old Mountain Man. Y'all, it's an old Creedence Clearwater song, but we kind of do it with kind of swamp music out of it, if you don't mind. Take me back down where cool water flows, y'all. Let me remember things I love. Stopping by the log where catfish bite, walking along the river road at night, and barefoot girls dancing in the moonlight. I can hear them bullfrogs calling me. I wonder if my rope is still hanging to the tree. I love to kick my feet way down in shallow water, shoot fly, dragonfly, get back to mama, pick up a flat rock and skim it across Green River. Yeah. Up at Cooter's place, I spent my days out with Daisy Duke and Roscoe Pico. Bobo and Luke, they took me over. Say you're gonna find the world be smoldering if you get lost. Come on home to Green River. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.